Hello, and welcome to the Luminate Year-End Music Report for 2023. I am Jaime Marconette, Senior Director, Music Insights and Industry Relations based out of Nashville, Tennessee.
And my name's Haley Jones. I am head of independent, so I oversee a lot of our independent labels, independent distributors, and I'm based in San Francisco.
And we are coming to you from Luminate's LA studio. It's fantastic to be here and sharing the data with you this morning. We've got the Hollywood sign over here, and it's another beautiful day in sunny Los Angeles, California. And we want to thank you for tuning in as well. This is something that we love to do every year, is share how we're seeing the data on our side with you all, and we just appreciate you tuning in for this bit today. I do want to touch on a couple of things before we jump in. We will save some time at the end for questions. So if a question comes up, please drop it in your Zoom chat. At any point, also, when you're looking at this and we're talking about, year-over-year growth of this period to last period, we are looking at the first 52 weeks of 2023 versus the 52 weeks of 2022. Just for those who are curious, the year end was December 28th of this year. That was the end of week 52. And I also just want to call out that there is a lot of data here. So we won't be reading every single point and reading the report to you. I want to make sure that you're all aware that we do have an interactive version of the year-end report that's live on our website, and we also have a PDF that you can download as well. So we're going to be talking about the things that we found the most interesting, but there is a lot more for you to dive into as well.
So if you're not familiar, here's a little bit more about what we do. We used to be known as SoundScan. We rebranded as Luminate a couple years ago. Our website, where you can find that fancy interactive version in the PDF, is luminatedata.com. And we track music consumption. So we have nearly 500 daily data providers. That includes radio airplay, streams, digital sales, physical sales. And the music team also includes an insights team. So we ask consumers more about them, who they are, and what motivates them to do all of that consumption. Luminate has a film and TV side as well, aptly titled Luminate Film and TV. So at some point in the near future, the goal is to have all of that data in one new place that we are fast and feverishly working on in the background.
That's going to be great. That is going to be great.
We have a packed agenda for you today. Here's our teas. These are the topics that we are going to cover. The interactive version is at luminatedata.com, but for the webinar, without further ado, let's jump in.
All right, so here comes the data. We're going to start off with global metrics, and total on-demand streams for global aggregate audio and video combined are up 33.7% globally this year to 7.1 trillion. Now that is a huge number, but I want to dive into the growth that we're also seeing on the audio side globally as well. So more than 4 trillion on-demand audio streams were counted globally in 2023. This is up from 3.4 trillion in 2022. And though it's not on this page, earlier this morning I went back and I looked at the 2021 number.
Yep.
2.7 trillion. That is a 50% growth in global on-demand audio streams in just 2 years. That's just astonishing. As we dive into the U.S. metrics, and again, I want to call out that there are a lot of numbers on this page, and there are a lot of numbers in stats throughout the entire presentation. Again, we're not going to just read every single one, but we're going to talk about those that we find some of the most interesting. And I wanted to dive in on the on-demand audio number for the U.S. as well. As you can see here, it's up 12.7% year over year. And this is acceleration, right? Yep. And global is accelerating, but U.S. is actually accelerating as well. And for those that are curious what I mean when I say acceleration, through 2019, through 2020, and 2021, U.S. on-demand audio streams were getting more and more every year.
Okay.
The thing was that they weren't getting more and more by the same amount every year. So that was actually going down, that new net audio streams. That changed last year when there were 120 billion new net audio streams in 2022 over 21. This year we counted 140.5 billion new net streams, and that's where that acceleration comes from, that there are more new net streams this year than there was last year.
Cool. So in 2024, we're expecting new albums from J-Lo. It'll be her first new album in 20 years. Green Day has a new album coming. And the Olympics are going to debut breakdancing as a sport in Paris. I'm really looking forward to that and some good moves.
That's going to be fun.
Meanwhile, here are the genres making moves in music. Ta-da! The fastest growing genres for 2023.
Here we have them.
In orange, share of consumption by genre, and in gold, growth in 2023 by volume. World music, Jamie, I'm assuming is J-pop and K-pop?
It is, and then also Afro beats as well.
Of course.
Is one of the subgenres that make that up, as well as others, and growing very, very steadily too.
So Latin also continues its upwards trajectory, as does country.
So let's dive in just a little bit on these as well. And, you know, one of the things that we wanted to touch on is that regional Mexican was one of 2023's biggest breakouts of any subgenre. The subgenre was actually up 60% year over year to almost 22 billion on-demand audio streams in 2023. And you can also see when looking at the other Latin subgenres how much it has grown. You know, when compared to Latin pop and Latin rhythm as well as Latin tropical. Now, you know, where we are seeing on the consumer research side, the highest proportion of listenership that of regional Mexican is through Texas, it's the Southwest,
Right.
and then also through California. This is also in line with what the U.S. Census would say is where the Mexican population is migrating into the U.S. So you can see that, you know, there is this higher listenership where these populations and diasporas have changed and have brought, you know, either their language or their music or their culture with them as well. And then also want to call out that we are seeing, you know, a large amount of non-Hispanics listening as well, and that, you know, Latin overall has been really booming in recent years. You know, the genre this year for Latin music, actually, there were 6 Latin music artists who had over 1 billion on-demand audio streams in the U.S., right? Bad Bunny, Peso Pluma, Ezelban, Armado, Karol G, and others are part of this 6. And, you know, want to encourage people to check out the PDF and the interactive version to go through those artists. And also wanted to call out that each one of those artists was in the top 125 most streamed audio artists in the U.S. for last year.
Nice. So there's a tour, Lainey Wilson's tour. She's finally going to do like a much anticipated tour, and she's calling it Country is Cool Again. And indeed it is.
It is.
We've been watching country grow for quite a while. It did so again in 2023, nearly 24%. We also see a new, younger, more streaming-focused fan emerging on the countryside. So on this slide, you're going to see some of the biggest country artists for the year, how their fans are listening, and then on the right-hand column, that's going to show the biggest fan cohorts for each of these artists. So notice the average country fan at the bottom, typically older, historically has interacted with music most probably on AM/FM radio, and different than some of the biggest artists this year that are above that bottom, right? Where we see Gen Z and the millennial fan base very streaming focused. Also, I don't know if you heard this, Jamie, but worth mentioning, Chris Stapleton and George Strait are going to do a tour together.
That's going to be
yes.
That's going to be a hot ticket. That is going to be a hot ticket.
Maybe we'll bring both audiences together on that one.
There you go. There you go. We also have our eye on J-pop, right? So now we're starting to look at more of our world genres out here, and this is a growing subgenre in the U.S. with fans that are more likely to be Gen Z. They're more likely to be LGBTQ+, and it leans a little male. The subgenre of J-pop was up 15%. Year over year, and it's definitely something that's bubbling and continues to be gaining some steam. So something that we are keeping an eye on, and we're going to have some more stats a little later in the presentation on J-pop as well.
So as you probably know, hip-hop and R&B really has been the genre to beat, the incumbent, if you will, for many years. On the left-hand side of this slide, U.S. consumption by genre last year. So hip-hop and R&B are in the gold, still the #1 spot. In red is rock, which is genre #2, and a special shout out, by the way. If you work in alternative or indie, make sure you check out the full report because it was also an awesome year for alternative.
Yeah, there's definitely some great stats in there on other genres as well. You know, one of the things that we also thought was very interesting, so in a year where the rich history of R&B hip hop was celebrated, 50 years, obviously, huge milestone. And, when that was celebrated, we did see that catalog streaming of R&B hip hop grew and outpaced the current streaming. And so one of the interesting things that we saw, which was a break in trend from the industry here, is that for R&B hip hop, current streaming, which for those who are curious, current is a track that is 18 months or newer. We consider catalog 18 months or older. Current streaming was actually down in volume. It was down about 7% for R&B hip hop. Now, that is worth calling out. As I said, it's a break in trend from the industry, whereas current streams for the industry, I believe, was up around 10.5% year over year. So this is a break in industry and something to keep break in trend and something to keep an eye on.
There were so many things happening for the 50th anniversary. A lot of going back and listening to some old phenomenal hip hop. So maybe that's
definitely
part of the big reason.
Definitely. And there have already been a lot of huge album announcements for 2024
Good.
coming. So this is definitely something to keep an eye on moving forward through 2024 as well. Looking at how genres are moving, one of the things that we've been fascinated with at Luminate, how music moves from territory to territory. So on this slide, I'm going to pause here just for a second to talk about the methodology a little bit and fill you all in on how we came up with this. But what we're looking at is we took the top 100 songs from these genres, top 100 songs from the U.S. streaming for each one of these genres. We then looked at the share that makes up in the rest of our country level panel, right? All 49 countries outside of the U.S. And we looked at the share of streaming. Now, what this does is it helps to even out some of the countries that just have a lot of streaming in our huge markets, right? So instead, we're looking at share. And so we also took one other caveat. We said, okay, well, let's look outside of this genre as sort of their home region, right? So for Afro beats, we looked outside of the Middle East and Africa there, and you can see that in terms of share of streaming of those 100 songs, you've got Luxembourg, Netherlands, France, the UK, and Portugal. So definitely a European stronghold there. When you go to K-pop, one of the things that jumped out is that Peru, Turkey, Bolivia, Romania, and Ecuador actually jump out as the share. Now, this is outside of the Asia-Pacific region. Right. And again, because we are looking at share, the U.S. would be the number one outside of Asia for K-pop, but because we're looking at share, it becomes Peru, Turkey, Bolivia, Romania, and Ecuador. Yeah, very interesting, and it shows how music is starting to move through different territories and countries.
Breaking down the borders. So as the world goes more global, so too does music, so too does Luminate. So trend 2 is about languages, listeners, and locations. Yeah. I love this slide because it shows a little bit of open-mindedness, right? This is streaming share by language content in the U.S. On the left, English still dominates. This is consumption in the U.S. So in the middle, the trend for English content over the last few years, it shows English content is down nearly 4%. And then what you see on the right is Spanish language growth in the U.S., which is up nearly 4%, almost the exact same number. Kind of wild.
That is pretty wild. And this is part of a bigger trend that we're also seeing globally as well, right? So where the share of English streaming globally has gone down in recent years. But each region does tell a different story, right? So you just said and told the audience that, well, it's Spanish in the U.S. that has picked up sort of that. Well, in Canada, it's actually Punjabi language that has picked that up due to the large South Asian population that's in Canada. And in Asia, it's actually Japanese that has picked up language share. So each region tells a different story, but what we are seeing as the trend is that English has been going down. One thing I wanted to call out is that we are looking at share here. That is naturally a zero-sum game. So if you gain in share, naturally something else has to go down. And one of the things that we wanted to call out is the rise of Hindi. Now, India grew in terms of on-demand audio and video streaming by 80%. In 2023. It is now the second largest market behind the U.S. in terms of combined audio and video streaming. And along with that, it brings Hindi music too, right? Hindi language music. So you see the large jump in Hindi there in recent years, while, it's also pulling from English and Spanish and Korean and Japanese because it's had such a large jump there. So definitely something to look at as well.
Totally makes sense. So this slide shows music discovery by languages spoken. So listeners who are open to multilingual music and how they are discovering music. And the answer is on movie soundtracks, in stream TV shows, and they are 50% more likely to discover music on video games.
Yeah, really, really interesting. And another key element that we've seen is that these listeners are also more likely to than the average U.S. general population to use community-focused social media platforms, right? So they're more than twice as likely to use Discord or Reddit or WhatsApp. And social media in nature is a borderless platform. It helps populations and people who are in different countries easily communicate with each other. And when you talk about something like WhatsApp, which is a communication tool, right, where it's oftentimes used for populations of people in different countries to be able to communicate with each other. You know, people are sharing music and they're sharing their fandom and they're communicating that over large areas. So it makes sense that these multilingual listeners that we're calling them are using these sorts of platforms to share their fandom.
Can you buy advertising on all three of those platforms?
And advertising opportunities are probably available. We'll just say that. All right, so let's dive headfirst into streaming. Now, I'm going to warn you right now that we're going to get very computational, but I think that that's why we're all here. So let's dive right in.
There's been a ton of conversation in the last couple of years about women in music, women in country music, women in the music industry. It's a topic near and dear to my heart. I actually serve on a board for women in music too. So good news on this slide. 2023 was an awesome year when it comes to girl power. So you'll see the last 5 years on this slide. Female artists are in orange, male artists are in gold, groups are in pink, non-binary in yellow. So check out the growth with the orange. Also interesting to me is it looks like the orange growth may be in direct correlation to the pink decline. So
yeah, you know, again, as we kind of talk about when we're looking at share, zero-sum game, you know, maybe that's where it pulled from a little bit more. It is very interesting.
Agreed. This is a really interesting way to look at currents versus catalog for 2023. This shows listening from each release year. So, by the way, super fun. Another plug for the interactive site on our website.
You have to check it out.
If the first thing you're noticing here is that 2023 looks smaller than 2022, before you make too many conclusions there, I think it's mostly a function of the fact that 2023 releases were building throughout the year, whereas for 2022, all of the songs were there already, right?
Yep, from day one.
Yeah, so there was more runway in 2022, less runway in 2023. So one thing you can take away for sure, almost half of all of the consumption for the year were for songs that were released in the last 5 years. So you can see that on the graph. Also notice the little pink diamonds here. We pulled out top streamers for releases in those years. So here's what that looks like. Tupac, for example. This is a song I'll never get sick of.
Love it.
From 1995, California Love. From 1987, Guns N' Roses, Sweet Child of Mine, of course.
Another classic.
And 1977, Fleetwood Mac, Dreams.
Yeah, I love this too. And we've included the number, the rank overall too. So this was the most streamed song from 1977, but it is also the number 56 most streamed song of 2023 in terms of on-demand audio streaming in the U.S. So make sure to check out the interactive version and the PDF for the rest of the songs that are listed there. There's a lot of fun stuff.
Is that TikTok video still paying off? That was Dreams, right?
Yeah,
it
is.
Crazy.
It is.
Mind-boggling.
Because that was several years ago now.
Yes.
Crazy. One of the topics that's also been top of mind for a lot of people are the amount of ISRCs that are serviced to DSP platforms every day. You know, this has been a big conversation over about the last year and a half. And in 2023, there was an average of 103.5 thousand ISRCs delivered each day. Now, if you've been with us throughout the year, we've been reporting this on a mostly quarterly basis. The top of the year, it was 120,000, you know, and it has fluctuated. But when the dust settled, we came in at 103.5 thousand per day. Now, this is up more than 10% in volume from the 93.4 thousand average from 2022. And when you look at this, we've broken out where those ISRCs are coming from, right? So 96.1% comes from what is noted here as the rest of industry. 3.9% is coming from major distribution. Major distribution, that's Sony, Warner, Universal, but we've also included their independent distribution arms, right? So the Orchard, Virgin, ADA, those all go into that as well. And the rest of industry number, that 96.1, is actually representative of about 99,000 ISRCs per day going to these platforms. I do want to call out rest of industry also includes, independent distribution as well as those DSPs that have historically catered to the creator community. I'm thinking about SoundCloud and AudioMac and where people can upload their music.
DIY.
Exactly. Now, the flip side of this is that with all of these ISRCs going to streaming platforms every day, not all of them have the same streaming impact. What we've done here, and I want to be very clear about this because this is a little bit different representation than what you'll see in the interactive version or the PDF. We've zoomed way in on the top of the pyramid here. So if you want to see the rest of the pyramid, please go to those other versions of the report that we've got. But we've zoomed way in on the top. And 436,000 tracks this year were streamed 1 million or more times globally. Now that's up from 373.5 thousand that were streamed 1 million times in 2022.
Fun.
Important to call out that there was also 45.6 million tracks that didn't get a single stream, 0 streams.
I don't get it. Like if I made a song and I uploaded my song to one of the DSPs, it seems like I'd go listen to it. I would at least make sure it worked.
Yeah, I would make sure that there were, that it was there and that it was totally working fine. And then I probably sent it to my family and
my
maybe
brother, my grandma,
my mom,
my neighbor,
my friends. I just send them my music.
So before we move on from here, interesting question or another question for you. Would you say that the long tail is growing or declining?
I would say that it's growing. Obviously things are becoming more concentrated at the top of the pyramid here, but we also look at other breakouts, right? One of the things that we've looked at is the top 10,000 tracks over several years and the amount of streaming volume that those top 10,000 make out. And the overall trend over the last several years is that the top 10,000 tracks have made up a smaller volume of streaming share in the total industry, which does indicate that there's more songs further down the tail that are creating impact.
Good. I think that's fun. So what about spend on stream? Overall, the U.S. music fan is spending more on streaming, which is true in pretty much every single generation, with one surprising exception, which is Gen Z. And Jamie, why do you think that is?
Yeah, this is a good one to call out.
Big deal.
It is. It's a good one to call out. But what we're seeing is there's really kind of two areas. Number one, live spending is up across generations. Everybody's spending more on live. So that's competitive for those dollars. Yeah. The other thing that we're seeing with Gen Z, though, is that we're also seeing that streaming video on demand platforms like Hulu and Netflix and others, those are competing for those dollars too. Those monthly subscriptions are competing for those dollars. And that's what's been reported from our Gen Z consumer research is starting to compete for those dollars as well. Speaking of dollars, let's talk about the business beyond the stream, right? Now that we've done a deep dive on streaming, there are a number of channels that are gaining prominence in offering avenues for artist monetization.
Good. This slide is about superfans. So how superfans are spending their money, what's important to them. And notice right at the top, the 80-20 rule is almost always applicable. It's applicable in the music business too. Nearly 20% of music fans are superfans.
That's amazing how that works.
Yep, really important group. Some stats on these superfans. They are 126% more likely to spend money on merch, 76%, or they spend 76% more on physical.
Yeah, exactly.
Yes. And 68% more money in general than the average music fan.
Yeah, it's these super fans are incredibly valuable. Now, they're also spending money on D2C as well. And in our mid-year report, we noted that D2C was up about 20%. Now, at the end of the year, D2C sales are up 38.6%. And if you're not familiar with D2C, this is direct to consumer. And essentially what you can think about is that these are official e-com web stores of artists and labels, and shorthand D2C.
Yep.
So D2C is up 38.6% across all formats. That is when you add in, vinyl sales and cassette sales and CD sales. And when you trend D2C for the year in terms of the total numbers across all D2C, 1 week does stick out. And that was the week of Taylor Swift's 1989 Taylor's Version release week. But, one thing that we wanted to call out and just remind people is that we did call out in mid-year that D2C overall was up 20%. So obviously that is going to push that number, even higher. But the overall trend here is that more people are spending and purchasing through D2C. Now, D2C is kind of interesting for a couple of other reasons, too. And we're just going to call out a few here. But over 60% of D2C sales are current. That is a title that's released in the most recent 18 months. Obviously, there's a large conversation about catalog and versus current and streaming and catalog overall, having more share. But in D2C, it leans current. And also rock rules. 38.6% of sales across all D2C formats last year was rock, and that's actually double the next closest genre, which is pop.
Wow. Impressive. So following the money, I thought it made sense to show you more on Jpop and Kpop. We could probably call Jpop the little brother of Kpop at this point. Fans of both subgenres are intensely loyal and intensely enthusiastic. I'm guessing they have a very high percentage of super fans. So the first column here shows Gen Z spend on merch, K-pop fans spending a little more on merch. Both, however, worth noting, want more merch. Make more merch.
More merch items.
Yes. At the bottom of the slide, K-pop fans 50% more likely to spend money on merch for an event they did not attend.
And can we just double click on that just for a second? Because I love this stat. And the reason why is if I was working with a K-pop artist or managing one or the label or working at the web store, if your artist has played a venue that has, I don't know, a certain cachet to the name,
Sure.
or, is well known or is historic or, a variety of different reasons, that should be a shirt because these fans are saying, hey, I just want that as a collectible. I want to know that, I want the shirt from my artist playing, the O2 Arena or something, right? So that should be a shirt.
Also worth mentioning, our consumer research team designed a way to find the optimal price point for music things. So, which here you're going to notice K-pop fans is $30.20 the optimal price point for a T-shirt.
Yeah, that's what they're saying they're going to pay, right?
And it pays to know your audience.
And I was taking a look in the platform, and I will say that there's a pretty wide range of what fans are telling you is their optimal range. I will just say that when I was checking out punk versus jazz versus classic rock, it's all over the place. So it really is about knowing your audience, and it's also very, very fun to check out.
So we're also seeing passionate fan bases gathering on community-focused social media platforms. So these are platforms that offer fans a chance to engage with others around their favorite artists, and these communities they really cater to spreading the ideas of fandom, right? And you can see a few of the genres that over-index on these platforms here. So EDM listeners more likely to use Discord, lo-fi hip-hop listeners more likely to use Patreon, and then J-pop over-indexes for both.
Yeah, these passionate fan bases, as you called out. Now, I want to dive in on Discord and Patreon just a little bit more because there are some differences in the users who use them and how they discover music, right? So on the Discord side, it's streaming services, it's social media, it's short-form video clips. That's how those Discord users are discovering music. Number one for Patreon, though, is friends and relatives. So number one discovery source is usually somebody who's close in their network and they're taking cues from and they're taking suggestions from and then they're willing to follow. Also, wanted to call out the stat here on the bottom right of the screen. And DSPs outside of the U.S. have been a little bit more forward in tipping the practice of tipping artists directly through these DSPs. And what we're seeing in the U.S. is that there is a willingness to tip artists directly through, either Cash App or Patreon or even directly through Venmo, but that it also depends on the fan, right? So it's about knowing your fan group. And so we just called out one of these right here, which is that 13% of U.S. Gen Z indie rock fans report a willingness to tip directly. And now that makes them 225% more likely than the average music listener. But we are seeing that there is this willingness to do this, but it also depends on your fan base.
I mentioned J-Lo's first album in many years earlier, but I'm not sure I mentioned there will be a film accompaniment to that new album. There's an Amy Winehouse movie expected in 2024, a Bob Marley movie I'm very excited about in 2024, and that's just to name the music movies.
Oh, yeah, that's going to be great.
Our trend number 5 is about soundtracks and syncs. So on the first slide here, you'll see some music movies that came out in 2023. And before we really jump in, I want to take a moment to take our hats off to Taylor Swift because she's a genius who had a monumentous year. Congratulations.
Oh, yeah.
Taylor Swift songs made up nearly 2% of the total U.S. market when you look at albums and track equivalents. So that is one in every 78 U.S. audio stream was for a Taylor Swift song.
That's pretty monumentous. That's when you really think about what that means across the entire country. That's crazy.
So meanwhile, what you're looking at here is the Eras Tour movie, side by side with the Talking Heads movie and the Beyonce movie. 3 very different artists who all made a really big impact. All the releases in the fourth quarter. I also think it's interesting that fourth quarter was kind of right on top of the strike that was happening here in Hollywood, and they all still made a really big impact.
Oh, yeah, for sure. And they made it impact both domestically and globally. So, we're taking a look on this screen at the on-demand audio streams in the U.S. and globally. Now, there was an impact from these as well on other formats. We definitely saw it with the Talking Heads and some of the physical formats, but each one of these had other impacts on other formats too. But we just wanted to have just the streaming numbers here. And you can see that each one of these films had a impact a little higher in the U.S. in terms of that 3-week volume change, but that it also impacted global as well. And, and speaking about films and global and how to move music and how that can be a little bit of a vehicle for that, we wanted to share this slide here on the Spider-Verse movie and the soundtrack as how soundtracks provide an opportunity to introduce music to new global markets, right? So on the left, we have the box office rank for the Spider-Verse movie, and then on the right we have the Metro Boomin soundtrack performance ex-US for it, and you'll see that countries like Mexico and the United Kingdom are on both of these. So these soundtracks really do provide a great opportunity to introduce music to new territories as a vehicle to do that as the film is being consumed as well.
So our final trend, 2023 was a weird year economically, for sure. Let's look at what that means for those investing in music.
Definitely. So what we've got here is taking a look at the number of publicly reported music finance acquisition deals 2018 to 23, right? Yep. And so what we've taken is the ones where the value was publicly reported. I know that there were others as well, but we wanted to just report just the ones that we could tell you were above 10 million for fact, and these are the ones that were where the value was publicly reported. What you'll see is that in 21, then 22, then 23, that those have gone down a little bit. On the right, we're also showing, what the effect of interest rates has, right? And, people have talked about this, about having an effect on these acquisitions. But, what does that really mean? And you can see that based on the Treasury interest rate over the last few years, we've included a second row which shows how much over your principal you would be paying in interest over a 30-year period. Whoa. And you can see that in 2021, you were paying 24%. But based on that Treasury interest rate, in 2023, you were paying 71% more. That's actually, let me do the quick math, 3 times.
Ouch.
That's 3 times more interest just because of how that rate has fluctuated in a couple of years. And that has a massive impact on that, right? But we're also seeing that there are new novel ways coming to energize these catalog acquisitions as well. And the one that we wanted to call out here is the ABBA Voyage Virtual Concert Tour. If you're not familiar, this is a avatar-based tour that's happening currently in London with avatars of ABBA. Now, we've put a bar in the global on-demand audio stream graph here to show you where that tour launched, right? Okay. And there is a new baseline in streaming after that. So that tour had an effect. You can see it right there. And overall, 2023 streams for ABBA were up nearly 17% global on-demand audio versus 2022 as this continues to go. Now, we've also heard of other virtual tours being announced. I know that KISS has been announced as a virtual tour. So there are these novel ways to energize these catalogs with marketing activities. And it's really exciting. And it'll be fun to see what else happens.
Kind of fun. So we have a brand new platform. You've heard us mention it a couple of times. For the first time ever, we have country level data in 49 different countries. And we are offering a free trial through the end of January on said new platform. So that's what this QR code is right here. Use this QR code if you would like a free trial. It will take you to a form that you'll fill out, and then somebody on our team will get back to you. If for some weird reason the QR code, it's not working, or you can reach out to any of us anytime, like anybody on the Luminate team on our website. Contact us, luminatedata.com. You can reach out to Jamie. You can reach out to me anytime, and we are happy to help, and we would love for you to see it.
Yes, definitely.
And I think the other thing we'll say is it really takes a village. Thank you so much to everyone who helped us put together the report. Thank you to everyone who helped us put together this webinar. Thank you to you, Jamie. I know you live and breathe this all year long, but you rock.
Oh, thank you, Haley, and thank you for your input and co-hosting.
I don't know, are we going to do some questions? Oh, okay. So we are going to take a couple questions.
We are.
I think I'm probably going to repeat them just because the people asking the questions are off mic, if you're cool with that.
I think that makes sense. And maybe I'll just go back a slide too, so anybody who wants to screenshot the QR code while we're doing this can just do it, and it'll be up for anybody to grab their phone.
Makes sense.
Okay, first question. Can you speak about which genres saw the slowest growth?
Okay. So the question is, can you speak about which genres had the slowest growth in streaming last year?
Yeah, definitely. And so we included the fastest growing, but if you were to look at the 3 slowest growing or those that declined, the 3 are, children's is one of them.
Okay.
And that's really because of the Encanto effect. If you remember in 2022, Encanto was massive, one of the biggest albums of the year. And that really drove the genre. So without a big player like that, the genre overall became a little slower, and one of the 3 slowest in terms of its streams.
We're also still coming off the pandemic,
I
feel like.
We are.
Yeah. Okay.
We are as well.
Okay,
so
that makes sense for children.
Definitely. Comedy was one of those genres, and then New Age as well was one of those genres. But, I like the referencing the Encanto one because I think that it can also show, how a massive album can also affect some of those sorts of things.
Yeah. Do we have other questions?
Can you speak about the growth in Latin music in the U.S. and whether it's coming from English speakers, Spanish speakers, or a combination of both?
Okay. Can you speak about the growth of Latin music in the U.S.? And is the growth coming from English speakers, Spanish speakers, or both?
The answer to that is it's really coming from both, right? So we talked about in regional Mexican how it lines up with the diaspora, and that is, 100% true, highest proportion of listeners, but we are seeing non-Hispanic fans also listen. Also, it's also important to call out that we are seeing just younger audiences in general who are open to listening to music in more than one language. So this is something that's happening, and it's really a combination of both there.
Well, and when you have artists like Peso Pluma making really mass appeal, I love Peso Pluma.
It's a great album.
I also can speak a little bit of Spanish, but definitely necesito practicar. Are there other questions?
Can you explain the difference between ISRC and
Oh, sure. Can you explain the difference between an ISRC and a song?
Yeah, that's actually a great question, and thank you for bringing that up. So, if you think about song as the umbrella, ISRCs can multiple ISRCs can be attributed to that, right? And so whether you have a piano mix or an a cappella or just a remix or maybe it's a live version, it's all the same song, right? It's based on the copyright of the song and those other elements, but there are different versions. And so to differentiate that, they each are given a different ISRC.
Got it. I was looking at a Miles Davis song the other day, and I saw 660 some odd ISRCs for one song.
Exactly.
Whoa.
Exactly, right? But if he
Yeah.
releases it from a club in New York or a club in Chicago, and you want to make sure that they're that they're categorized differently, and you can pull them up, then they each have a different ISRC.
And even if maybe not all of them were different versions, but some of them could have been from a different era, right? On a different record label or
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah.
Last question.
Sure.
You ran through this report and the data. Was there one or two things that really stood out to you this year?
Okay, the last question. As you ran through the data and you were putting together the year-end report and the year-end webinar, what was the one thing that surprised you the most?
That's a great question. There are so many interesting stories that come out of the data when you start looking at all the trends and all the different elements. But I will say that, the one thing, and we actually referenced both of these in the report, but the one thing or two things, that 1 in 78 audio streams in the U.S. was a Taylor Swift song. That is a pretty astounding number when you think about it. 1 in 78 across the entire U.S. market, which is the biggest market
Across the entire year.
Yeah, across the year. That's astounding.
Wow.
And then I also just personally, I just loved the growth and the of streaming and the fact that Miley Cyrus or SZA or Taylor, what we saw from women streaming in the U.S. and the growth there, I just personally love that a lot. And that's actually in line with what we've seen some other reports from other markets and too, not just in the U.S. So that's one that I was loving a lot as well.
Nice. All right. I think that was the last question. Thank you so much. Thank you. Happy 2024. We really appreciate you spending some time with us. Download the report.
Definitely. And thank you so much for tuning in and spending that time with us. Thank you, Haley.
Thank you, Jamie.
All right.
Bye.
Bye.